My wife doesn't have long left in her for sure. I'll have to double or even triple the amount of life insurance she has so we can have a nice married life together.
When I returned home early after a business trip, that was only a fraction of what I overheard of a conversation between my husband and a woman whose voice I didn't recognize. I couldn't believe my ears at first. Then, after listening to them for a while, I heard their grand plan of the purest evil I've ever seen. Now, my darling, don't think it's going to work out that easily. This is the story of how my husband turned out to be one of those people who had the darkest schemes to siphon money out of me. And because I luckily discovered their plan just in the nick of time, I was able to turn the tables and plunge him into the depths of hell. Revenge was mine to relish. My name is Cameron. My husband Braden and I had been married for 5 years when this whole story took place. We first met when my boss got drunk at an after-work party one fateful night and jovially forced us to exchange contact information when he was entertaining Braden, who had come to my company to do business. At first, I was reluctant to exchange contact information with someone I knew only as a business partner, but in hindsight, it was the best he'd ever done, and I often felt grateful to my boss. After we got married, we respected each other and got along well with each other in the relationship. But there was one problem that I always had with my husband, and it wasn't something that could be resolved easily. The problem was children. We had been married for 5 years, and we still did not have any children even after that amount of time. I asked Braden if he was thinking about having children sometime soon, but he said he didn't want any yet.
I've heard that raising a child is expensive and that having a child can be bad for the relationship between husband and wife. I don't want to argue with you, so let's talk it over thoroughly and have a child when the time is right for both of us.
That's what he said, and things would have gone nicely thereafter, if not for my in-laws, Mr. and Mrs. Gertrude, who were pushing me to have grandchildren as soon as possible. They never pushed me in any harassing way, mind. It was more like a subtle request through conversation about their children when they first had theirs. But I got the message loud and clear. They really wanted a grandchild, and I wanted to respond to that feeling. But when I told Braden that his parents were anxious for us to have children soon, he always got in a bad mood.
What, you think it's my fault? It's my fault for not having children yet?
It's not like that, honey. Both your mother and father want to see their grandchildren soon.
I told you I'm not ready yet. Period. End of story. Don't talk about it with me anymore, you understand?
He got pretty upset and directed a not-so-nice tone towards me. Even after a few days, when I brought up the subject a couple of times, he always got aggressive. Forget the fact that they wanted a grandchild, but the very moment I mentioned his parents to him, he flew into a temper. This is because of the relationship between Braden and his parents. He was genuinely afraid of them, particularly his father. Mr. and Mrs. Gertrude are both police officers. And even Braden's older brother Hayden is also a police officer. His parents wanted Braden to become a police officer too, and that was why he was raised strictly to become just that. That was also his dream, and he was motivated at the time, but he eventually lost steam because of a newfound passion he discovered in college, coupled with his failures to pass the exams required to become a police officer. He was always saying that he was a failure, as if he had the feeling he'd disappointed his parents. I guess he was rebelling against me because he couldn't retaliate against his parents no matter what they said to him. A few weeks later, I went to my parents-in-law's house along with Braden, and no sooner had I returned from a quick trip to the bathroom upon arrival that they were asking him if we were going to have children yet. I didn't know how to respond, so I looked down and remained quiet. Braden replied,
"Well, maybe someday. Someday soon."
When we got home after a nice visit, his personality made a complete 180.
You couldn't just say something like, "We don't want to have kids just yet," instead of just staying quiet like a dead fish and let me handle my parents?
I'm sorry?
I mean, I really don't mind if we have a child right now, but are you going to keep your relationship the same as it was when we first met? Can you bring the same amount of energy to what we have as you did years ago?
When we first met, I was still in my early 20s and very young, full of energy and full of determination to excel in the workforce. Now, I was 30 years old and I didn't have the same youthfulness as when I was in my early 20s. It will be difficult to stay that young, but I'll try my best.
So in other words, you can't. And if you really do such a simple thing like that, don't ever talk to me about kids again. If you have a child and you don't look as beautiful as you should, what's the point of even being married to you, huh?
He got angry with me. I was surprised that he would take his anger out on my appearance. I didn't think he would feel that much in this aspect, and I was depressed that the reality was crueler than I'd hoped. Then my company changed my work schedule and I had to work in shifts. Since I had to work the night shift, my life and Braden's were in conflict every day when it came to time. It became difficult to coincide my days off with his. And even when we were able to get our days off together, he almost always had other plans and we thus couldn't spend time together. I thought we would be able to spend time together, Braden.
I'm going to a barbecue with my junior colleague, Cameron. They told me they couldn't light the fire themselves because they don't know how, so I have to go. Yeah, otherwise, everyone will be in trouble. I'm sorry, honey.
My husband's apologizing, but he's got this look on his face like he's trying to get me to allow him to go sooner rather than later. We hadn't been able to make plans in a while, and we had planned to go to the movies. I was upset that we had to cancel those plans that I'd been looking forward to, but I didn't want to be mad at Braden for doing something else. There was nothing I could do about it, so I just stayed home and relaxed. Then I began to wonder, when was my husband going to ask me to have children? Will we continue to live in this manner? He said that our relationship would change once we had children, but from my perspective at the time, it had already changed from when we were newlyweds, and I don't think that change was anything good. While I was thinking about this and numerous other things alone in the house, I noticed the date had changed in what seemed like a blink of an eye. But he never came home. How was it possible for it to be past midnight while he was only having a barbecue? Just when I let myself become pretty suspicious of his whereabouts and intentions, he came home. Allow me to use a Scottish expression here. He's had a toad and a half for breakfast, it seemed. In layman's terms, he was drunk out of his skull. Where were you?
Oh, shut up. Why do you care where I've been? I freaking didn't come home because I couldn't stand to look at a haggard face like yours.
He merely shouted that and went to his room. I couldn't hide my surprise at his comment, but I'm sure this is what his heart truly thought about me. After that, his attitude worsened day by day. If he didn't approve of something about me and how I looked in any way, he would say something like,
"The younger girls in my work are still very cute and attractive and young, and they're already married too. There is no one like you. Someone who ceased to be a woman the moment she got married, only to become an ugly, aging hag."
He brutally criticized me like that, and he additionally started comparing me to other women in the office. For example, when I cooked,
I saw a lunchbox of one of my juniors at work, and it looked really delicious and healthy. I bet a girl like that will make a good wife.
He literally compared me to women at his work and favored them every single time. Another example, when I was sleeping on the sofa on my day off.
All you do is freaking sleep when you should be worrying about your appearance. If you don't work a little harder, I think I'd want to be with another woman.
That was probably the cruelest of all. After a month of these comments, I was so tired from the stress of it, and coupled with the lack of sleep, even when I ate something at home, my stomach couldn't keep it down, and I had to run to the bathroom almost every time. Braden made fun of me instead of worrying about me when he saw how skinny and tired I'd become. His attitude also pushed me into a corner with no way of escape. One day, I went to the supermarket to buy groceries for dinner, and Braden came into the supermarket with some colleagues from his work. He and I locked eyes, and I approached to say hello. That's when he and a beautiful woman stopped in front of me, staring at me cantankerously.
"I wish you were as beautiful as this girl. When I saw you here, I didn't want the others to know you were actually my wife. If this girl was my wife, I'd be so proud of her. I'd brag to everyone she was my wife."
That's what I was told to my face. The woman next to me was smiling at him in a lovey-dovey kind of way. They honestly looked like a couple. I was too shocked to speak. Then he added,
"I'm going to a home party at my colleague's house today. I'll be home late."
He and the woman left the store. I went home and kept on thinking about what my husband had said. As a result, I couldn't sleep until morning and was getting ready to go to work when Braden came home, but he just showered before going right to work. I couldn't help but spend the rest of the day thinking about him. When he came home that night, he said to me as usual. I snapped. I flew into a rage. "Enough! You don't even look at me, and all you ever do is freaking complain about me. I'm sick of it all. You're probably having an affair with that girl from yesterday, aren't you?"
"I'm not cheating on her, but with an ugly bitch like you. I feel like no one could blame me for cheating on you with her. Anyone would expect me to be cheating, to be honest."
He actually started laughing. His attitude made me lose my patience further. If I stayed with a self-centered, selfish bastard like you, I might find other gentlemen more attractive. Who knows? Maybe I could cheat on you instead. When I said this, he turned blood red, turned furious, and started brushing everything off the table onto the floor.
"Don't you freaking dare rebel against me. If I cheat on you, you know what your fate's gonna be, huh? All you have to do is shut up and live your life as I tell you."
He glared at me with a murderous look. Seeing him in such a state at me made me feel afraid of him for the first time. Since then, whenever Braden got angry, he became more physically violent with objects more and more, and the house quickly became a swirling vortex of messiness. Shards of plates, bowls, and glasses reached places I couldn't reach to clean. Sauces and juices from meat stained the wall, and the wooden floor became sticky with a residual mixture of gravy, ketchup, and wine. I was so stressed that I literally couldn't eat. I used to be able to eat and swallow it, regurgitation notwithstanding, but now I couldn't even put the food in my mouth anymore. Just being with my husband made me feel depressed. One day I was ordered to go on a business trip, which obviously meant I had to leave home for a few days. I honestly felt a little grateful. The trip was for a week. When I told Braden about the trip, all he said was,
"Get the hell out of here,"
and threatened to kick me out of the house if I didn't shake a leg and get ready. His reaction made me feel all the more relieved because I didn't have to see Braden's face when I was gone. I started the business trip strong, working hard and finally getting some blissful sleep. But I unfortunately finished the work unexpectedly early, so I had to go home early. I was planning to stay on the business trip and do some other work until the week was up, but the head office asked me to come back if I was available. Braden had never contacted me during the business trip, so I went home without telling him I was on my way home. When I walked in the front door, I saw a woman's shoes and thought they belonged to my mother-in-law, so I quietly crept into the living room. Then I heard a woman's voice along with Braden's. The voice was not that of my mother-in-law, but that of a young woman, and I didn't recognize it.
My wife doesn't have long left in it for sure. I'll have to double or even triple the amount of life insurance she has so we can have a nice married life together.
I couldn't believe my ears at first. After that, I tried not to make a sound and crept up against the door to the conversation more closely and quietly.
After all those attacks, she's not even eating anymore. So, we're almost there.
Brayden, darling, stop. You're scaring me. I quickly pulled out the audio recorder I use at work and recorded the conversation between the two traitors. They didn't even know I was home and started talking about their crazy plan, which was absolutely golden.
I'm going to increase her life insurance. I'm trying to save money to live with you, Trina.
After living with you this whole week, I thought you were just the best husband I've ever had. Your wife was an old lady when I saw her at the supermarket the other day, and I'm hoping you'll dump her and move in with me as soon as possible.
But if we got divorced, it'll be a bit of a hassle, won't it? So we're going to have to psych her out and send her across the river Styx, if you know what I mean. It's ridiculous to pay for alimony, isn't it?
And my husband laughed at the end. I knew he hated me, but I never thought he hated me this much. I had no feelings of sadness whatsoever, only anger remained. When the conversation between the two snakes in the grass died down, I left the house and headed for a hotel. I decided to stay at the hotel for the duration of what I told him was my business trip instead of going home. I then decided to go to a detective agency and have them look for evidence of Brayden's infidelity. They said they could not give me the results of their investigation immediately, but they promised to contact me as soon as they had some evidence. To my great surprise and pleasure, however, on the very same day I hired them for the investigation, I received a call from the agency saying that Brayden really was having an affair with the woman he was with at the supermarket. Her name was Trina Milner Scudder, and she was a junior employee at Brayden's workplace, so she was talking about me like she knew me. I was almost overcome with anger, but I bit my lip, kept my sanity, and promised myself that I would make sure he'd really suffer from what would happen if he cheated on his wife. When I returned home a few days later, he was already there, and he spoke to me in the kindest voice I had ever heard from him recently.
You don't seem to be looking too good lately. Are you all right, honey?
Yes, I'm fine.
I know you're busy with work and we're going to have to think about having a baby and all that, so why don't we raise the amount of your life insurance a little? I think it's better to be prepared now, just in case the worst happens. Of course, you're not the only one who wants to raise the amount. I'll raise mine too.
I asked the following question with my last bit of hope. Does this mean we're going to start raising kids?
I'm fine with the idea. Work's becoming less and less of an issue these days, but I'll still be busy with work until next month, so maybe we can start trying next year.
He replied with a smile. I'm sure he thinks he can have me dead by next year. I couldn't stop being angry at Brayden, who only thought about the insurance money. But I thought it would be so much easier now to punish him if he would be that evil. You're absolutely right. I've been really tired lately, and if we're going to have a baby, next month would be better. But I'm sure this month will be more difficult for me, considering I might not have very long left in me. Brayden turned visibly distraught when I said that, his eyes scurrying around in all directions. I once heard that men who want to end their relationship with their wife and want to be with a younger woman do what they must to physically and mentally exhaust their wife, to the point where she just dies one way or the other. These men are thinking of increasing the amount of their wife's insurance to pay for their new honeymoon. I never dared look away from Brayden's eyes as I said this, and he suddenly became extremely anxious and jittery, causing his voice to rise in volume and intensity.
All right, and?
I'm just saying that there are people like that, I calmly replied.
I know. I can't believe such terrible people exist. This world is a horrible place.
For real. It's scary to think such evil people exist in this world. I genuinely think people like that just go to frickin' hell. You know what I mean? I laughed as I looked at Brayden. He shuddered as though the temperature of the room had dropped below zero. I then told him I had forgotten something at my office and left the house. Of course, this was a lie. I went to my parents-in-law's house instead. I showed them the evidence of their son cheating on me, and I asked them to follow me home. They deeply apologized for what their son had become, and they were heart-wrenchingly ashamed. Mrs. Gertrude almost started crying, despite her naturally strong personality. They generously offered their cooperation, and we went back to my place together. When we arrived, Brayden noticed that I had brought his parents with me.
Wait, why are Mom and Dad here? How could you do such a thing to such a wonderful wife? What are you talking about? I'm not having an affair, Dad.
You're wasting your time, boy. Cameron here has already shown us the proof.
Proof? What frickin' proof?
I immediately bring out the audio recorder that recorded his conversation with Miss Trina Milner Scudder. I play the recording back. Mr. Gertrude was furious when he discovered what was said. Brayden, who is scared shitless of his father, was freaking the hell out. Mr. Gertrude went on to say,
Call your darling lover. Get her ass over here this instant.
He was outright yelling at him. Brayden, with trembling hands, called his darling Trina. A few minutes later, the woman arrived and casually opened the front door and entered the house. She noticed Mr. and Mrs. Gertrude were present and tried to make a run for it. But my mother-in-law, who was a police officer, threw her up and over judo-style my back and crushed her to the ground. I told her, I'm going to charge you as much as the cost of the life insurance you decided for me. Then I left the house, never to return. My in-laws would take care of the rest for me, they promised. And boy, did they ever keep it. Braden and I got a divorce finalized within 48 hours. He contacted me several times afterwards to beg for a reduction in alimony, which had been around $100,000, about the same amount as his proposed price for my life insurance. But I ignored all of his calls. I don't like being asked to do things only when it suits those asking for the favor. I would like something out of it myself. Braden and Trina were later fired from their jobs. They continued with their relationship, but my husband had been spending a lot of money on his girl since they were together. So they had close to no savings and had to borrow money to pay the alimony. They now had no jobs and no money, and eventually they couldn't continue on with this lovey-dovey relationship, and they broke up. After that, I myself concentrated on my work. I was transferred to the branch office where I went for my business trip. It's a big change in the working environment, but I'm enjoying it to the fullest. Since leaving my ex-husband, my weight has returned to normal, and I've recovered mentally and physically. I've recovered enough to consider remarrying if I meet someone wonderful in the near future. From now on, I intend to lead a happy life for myself, and I hope that you also are careful with the people you interact with. Find the right person for you and live a happy life yourself. Good luck to you.